Welcome back to the Rugby Historian YouTube channel. In our previous video, we previewed the final weekend of the Six Nations 2026 tournament. If you haven't watched that already, please go and have a look at that. Today, we'll be discussing the Rugby Europe Championship, which has its own final day this Sunday, a Super Sunday, if you will. And we start off with the final, Georgia versus Portugal. Georgia are going for their 9th title in a row, while Portugal returned to the final after having missed out last year to Spain. They competed in the 2023 and 2024 final, both times losing to the Georgians, the last time being 36-10 in the 2024 final. Georgia had an underwhelming start to their 2026 Rugby Europe Championship, especially in that first game against Switzerland, where they only led narrowly by half time. Since then, they've picked up the pace and put in good performances against Spain and then against Romania in the semi-final. Romania were much better than they had been up to that point, but Georgia were professional and ultimately beat them quite comprehensively. Portugal, on the other hand, cruised through their pool stage and put in a gutsy performance against Spain in the semi-final to emerge victorious there 26-7. Portugal are ranked 16th as we go into this game, while Georgia head into the clash ranked 13th. Next up, we have Spain versus Romania. Now, Spain will be disappointed that they missed the opportunity to get back into the final after having contested the final last year. They have finished third on fourth at 4 occasions, the last time being in 2024 when they beat Romania 40-33. Romania, on the other hand, will be a bit more chipper. They put in a good performance against Georgia, eventually just running out of steam towards the end. It's a big turnaround from a disappointing pool stage where they lost their first game against Germany and barely scraped through ahead of Belgium, basically getting through on their head-to-head record. Spain have only beaten Romania on 5 occasions, but 3 of those have come in the last 5 meetings. Romania go into the clash ranked 21st, while Spain are 17th in the rankings after having dropped down 2 places after their loss to Portugal. Okay, now we move into the rankings final bracket. Those who finished 3rd and 4th in their pools were placed into this bracket and played their own semi-finals last week. Last week saw Germany defeated by Switzerland to get relegated and Belgium overcoming the Netherlands. So in our 5th and 6th place playoff, we have Belgium versus Switzerland. The Swiss have already had a very positive campaign, avoiding relegation and sending Germany down to the trophy. 5th place would just be an added bonus and a cherry on top. Belgium also had a good campaign and are trying to finish 5th again after finishing 5th last year. The previous 2 years they finished 7th, so this is steady progress for them. The Belgians beat the Swiss last year 38-5 in the ranking semi-finals, with the previous meeting in 2022, the meeting before, going the Swiss' way actually, when both of them were playing in the Rugby Europe Trophy competition. So both teams have grown quite a lot since then. Belgium go into the clash ranked 22nd in the world, while Switzerland will go into it ranked 27th. Then the last game we'll be discussing is Germany versus the Netherlands. Now Germany, like I said before, have been relegated back to the trophy. They gained promotion to the championship in 2023 and survived the next 2 years, but now time has caught up with them and they'll be going back to the trophy after having finished last year and potentially finishing last again this year. The Dutch, on the other hand, have also had a very disappointing campaign, finishing bottom of their group and losing to Switzerland in an upset during the pool stage, and then losing against the Belgians again this year after losing against the Belgium outfit last year to miss out on a chance to qualify for the Rugby World Cup. They finished 6th last year and the 5th place team went on to that final qualification tournament. The Dutch did finish 5th in 2023 and 2024, so finishing 7th or 8th this year is quite a drop from those heady heights, and they will be trying to turn that around next year. The Germans head into the clash ranked 33rd, while the Netherlands are only 5 places above them in 28th. That's a bit of background on these fixtures. Now let's see how they will affect the rankings. Okay, so now let's look at how all those matches will potentially affect the world rankings. To do that, we'll go back to the Rugby Historian website and go to the predictor, which you can get there from the rankings drop down, clicking predictor. So let's take a look at the Rugby Europe Championship fixtures, starting with Georgia versus Portugal. Now Georgia enter the game in 13th here and Portugal enter the game in 16th. If the Georgians were to extend their winning run in the championship and claim their 9th title, let's say by 15 points or less, they could climb above Wales. That said, that only happens if Wales lose. Wales winning would propel them up to 11th, but if Georgia were to win by more than 15 points, by 16 points or more, they would climb above Japan. So Georgia could finish the weekend in 11th, which is their highest ever ranking. They were last there in November 2025, so they were there very recently. They would get back to their best ranking. But let's say Wales were to win against Italy, then that changes things quite a lot, since Wales are considered the underdogs in that game. So if Wales were to win, Wales would go into 11th and Georgia would go to 12th. So Georgia's progress in the rankings is very much determined by what Wales do. But if it goes to form and Italy were to win, then Georgia would move to 11th with a comprehensive win over Portugal. But let's say Portugal instead win that match, a bit of an upset ranking wise and form wise in terms of the championship. Let's say Portugal were to win, then Portugal would actually move within one place of Georgia into 14th, as we can see here on the right. They would climb 2 spots up to 14th, gaining 1.54 points. That's quite a lot. Their highest ever ranking was 13th back in 2024, January 2024, so they would still be one place below that. But if they were to win by a considerable margin, they would close that gap to Georgia right down to within less than a point. That would be quite an upset in the rankings, given the rankings gap. So Portugal would get 2.3 points, with the maximum being 3, remember. So that would be quite an upset, but they could then close that gap quite considerably to Georgia. But let's say it goes to form and Georgia stay the champions, they win again, and we put that as Georgian win. Let's keep that there for now. Okay, the next game we'll be looking at them to see how all these fixtures interact with each other and the results interact with each other is Romania versus Spain. So Romania head into the clash they are in 21st position, while Spain are in 17th. Now Spain will be the favorites here. So let's say Spain win that match by 15 points or less. You can see that they would then go back above Portugal if Portugal lose. Spain would then go back to 16th. Their highest ever ranking was 14th, in which they reached in November 2025. They dropped off that ranking during November last year, and then they lost to Portugal last week, dropped them down to 17th. So if Spain were to win and Portugal were to lose, they would gain back one of those positions and go back to 16th. If Spain, however, win by more than 16 points or more, they could gain 2 spots and go back to 15. So that's the best case scenario for Spain. They win by 16 points or more and Portugal lose. If Spain win by 16 points or more and Portugal win, then that gap would be much smaller. In fact, Portugal would still stay above Spain and Spain would only move up to 16. So these games are very closely linked in the rankings final. Spain's progress is very much based on Portugal. If Spain win and Portugal lose, then Spain could get up as high as 15. But even with a win, a comprehensive win, Spain would only be able to get to 16th if Portugal beat the Georgians. But if Romania were to win, on the other hand, that would gain them quite a lot of points since the ranking gap is quite big. So a Romanian win a Romanian win, if we look here at the table, would keep them in 21st, but it would be a big points gain of 1.38. But Spain would drop down 3 spots, down all the way to 20th. The problem for Romania is that that's a decent gain in terms of points, reflecting the rankings gap, as I said, but their gap to the rest of the teams above them is quite large, about 4 points already. So they've got a lot of ground to make up. So even a positive result against Spain won't push them up the rankings, but it would be disastrous for Spain. Drop them all the way down to 20th, where they haven't been in a long time. If the Romanians put in a stellar performance and somehow beat Spain by more than 15 points, that gap would be even smaller, and Spain would really have to be looking over their shoulders in the coming Nations Cup that they'll be competing in. Romania would have considerably closed the gap to them and those above them. But let's keep the Spain result as a win. Let's keep Spain as the winners there, just to keep the rankings in its most probable position. That loss to Spain would see Romania drop down. So they can't gain anything from a win, Romania, but they could drop down to 22nd if they lose against Spain, with Belgium moving up to 21st. Okay, so let's go to the next game then, talking about the Belgians. If the Belgians were to win by 15 points or less, they would go up to 21 and increase that gap over Romania. If they were to win by more than 15 points, all that would really do is widen the gap to Romania. Like I said before, the same goes for Belgium, it goes for Romania. There's a bit of a gap between the top 20 and the rest. There's about a 4 or 5 point gap there already. So all that they really would be doing there is closing that gap, and hopefully closing that further during next year's competition. But they can't really catch Samoa in 20th at this stage. Okay, if Switzerland were to win, however, it'd be quite an upset. Belgium would suffer in the rankings, given the rankings gap. They would drop all the way down to 25th, which is a 3 place drop for them. While Switzerland would go up 1 to 26th. Coincidentally, 26th is the Swiss's best ever ranking. They reached that for the first time in October 2024. So a win for them would get them back to their all-time high, which would be an incredible achievement for them, and really signify great progress this year. Okay, but let's say Switzerland put in an all-time performance and beat the Belgians by more than 15 points. Then the rankings would look as follows. Switzerland would get to their best ever ranking of 25th and actually leapfrog Belgium. So that type of defeat for Belgium would be disastrous. They would drop down 4 places all the way down to 26th, while Switzerland would rise to their best ever ranking. So there's a lot to play for on that match. They start the weekend quite far apart, but they could end up swapping by the end of the weekend if the Swiss really do a number over the Belgians. But let's say Belgium won by 15 points or less, then the rankings would still look like this, and they would go up to 21st. So there's a big swing for Belgium here. They could end up in 21st, but they could also end up in 26th. So a lot to play for there. Then the last game is Germany versus the Netherlands. Germany head into the clash ranked 33rd. You'll see them down here at the bottom, while the Netherlands go into the clash in 28th. Now the best ever ranking for the sides, Germany got to 22nd back in November 2017, which is a long time ago. They have since dropped quite considerably. The highest they've been recently is 30th in March 2024. While the Netherlands, their highest ever ranking was 23rd, also quite long ago, in January 2019. Their most recent best performance is the 24th in January 2025. So both of those teams are quite a bit below where they've peaked before. Okay, let's see what those result in this game will do to the rankings. You can see that the gap is quite large here, about 4 points between the Netherlands and Germany. So Germany would benefit a lot from a win. So let's say if Germany do get the win over the Dutch, then we can see there's quite a bit of movement here. Germany would move up 2 places to 31st, the Netherlands would also drop another place to 29th. Remember, the Netherlands already dropped a place last week after losing to Belgium. So that was what would occur if Germany were to win. If the Netherlands were to win, they would move up one spot above the Swiss into 27th, or Germany would drop down a further 2 spots to 35th. That's quite low for them, very low for their recent history. So yeah, that's what would happen with the Netherlands win, which is the more likely result given the rankings. If the Netherlands win by more than 16 points, they would stay in 27th, and Germany would stay still in 35th. They would still drop 2 places. They have enough of a buffer over Kenya at 36th not to drop down that far. Lastly, our last outcome here, let's say Germany were to win by 16 points or more, then we will see a significant shift due to that ranking gap and the fact that it's a neutral home ground. So Germany isn't seen as the home team, so that doesn't decrease the amount of points they then get. If Germany were to win by 16 points or more, they would actually move above the Netherlands remarkably into 29th, which would be their highest ranking in a long time, while the Netherlands would drop all the way down to 31st, 3 places to 31st. So lots on the line here. The big swings really only come about with large victories for the underdogs. The teams aren't that close that just a normal one would see the big swings, but yeah, lots to play for, and the final rankings could look very interesting. Okay, so we've looked at all the outcomes for all of the fixtures, but let's now look at what I think is the most likely lock rankings ladder by the end of the weekend. Okay, so to get an accurate picture, we would also have to predict the outcome for Wales versus Italy, which, based on form, I think Italy will get the win there. So we put them at 15 or less win. Then I put Georgia on a 15 plus win. I think that the Georgians will get the job done, and in the end put up a bit of a score, enough in any case to get to that 16 plus mark. So in that case, Georgia would then end up 11th, like I said before, with Japan and Wales both dropping down, Wales ending the weekend in 13th. Then I think that Spain will get the better of Belgium in their 3rd-4th playoff. That would mean that Spain move up 1 and Portugal drop down 1, given that Portugal would lose by more than 16 points in this prediction. Then in the 5th-6th place playoff, I think that Belgium will get the better of the Swiss, so they will then switch with Romania, since Romania would then go down to Spain in this prediction. And then in a similar vein, I think that the Netherlands will get the better of Germany as well, by 15 points or less, so they would then switch with Switzerland and go up to 27th, while Switzerland would drop down to 28th, and Germany would drop down 2 places down to 35th. That's my predicted outcome for this weekend. Tell me what you think about that. It's probably going to be wrong if we take into account all the rugby that's been played recently. It's full of upsets. Yeah, go play around yourself with the predictors, see all the wacky rankings that you can come up with. But yeah, that's my prediction for this weekend's games. And there we have it. That's Super Sunday wrapped up, the last weekend of the 2026 Rugby Europe Championship. It's been a fantastic championship with a bit of an upset as Portugal get back into the final against Georgia. Portugal having a bad 2025, getting back into their groove, while Georgia finally found theirs throughout a bit of a stuttering pool stage, you might say, before really catching form against Spain and then against Romania. It'll be interesting to see if Portugal can deny Georgia their 9th title in a row, and it will be interesting to see if the Swiss could finish in 5th for the first time ever, having only been in the competition last year and this year. Lots to play for on Sunday, with all the games happening in Madrid, and free to watch, importantly, on rugbyeurope.tv. I'll put the link down in the description. Go have a look after watching all those Six Nations games. Free Sunday, full of rugby, 4 interesting games that will really have a big bearing on the rankings down there. We'll be back next week to review these fixtures and see how they actually affected the rankings. Thank you for watching. See you next time.